Hey everyone, Karl once again for another recap from the UFC Apex. Before we start, I want to say a big thank you to anyone who watched my interview with Gillian DeCourcy. If you haven't seen it yet, there's a link in the top right hand corner. It was very interesting to hear somebody who competes for Invicta, to look at what she thinks of the sport at the moment, and hear some of her opinions on what she thinks is going to happen in the future, especially in regards to potentially a UFC atomweight division. And speaking of atomweight divisions, we have got a former champion in our main event last week. Michelle Waterson took on Marina Rodriguez to see who could emerge as a potential title threat to Rose Namajunas. Let's get to the fights. And the first place we've got to start is that main event, with Marina Rodriguez claiming a unanimous decision win over Michelle Waterson, extending her record to 14-1 and setting up the prospect of a match with someone in the top 5 this fall. Before we get to the fight itself though, I want to talk a little bit about the fans' reaction to the matchup itself. Now, when this fight got announced as the main event a couple of days ago, there was almost this backlash from the main fan base. Now, I know a lot of us were looking forward to Dillashaw versus Sandhagen, and compared to how big and how exciting that fight could have been, this was a step down. But I was especially concerned that most of the backlash stemmed simply for the two of them being women. Now, I've seen Fight Night main events from fighters who were lower ranked, featuring guys who had dull fighting styles, yet the fan base seemed completely intolerant towards the idea of women headlining outside of title matches. And even then, it's not 100% supported. Even Shevchenko versus Carmouche, which main evented, I think, Fight Night Uruguay, that got a lot of backlash, and that was a title fight. And it's especially ironic in this case, since Michelle got very similar grief when she headlined against Angela Hill last year. And that fight, in my opinion, was fantastic. It's just something I've noticed about the fans, which I'm a little on the outs with. I want to know where you stand on it in terms of the idea of women main eventing. As for this fight itself, the big story to come out of it was Marina Rodriguez. Marina, for me, was always sort of this strawweight dark horse. Yes, she had the unbeaten streak, she had solid wins over people like Tecia Torres, but even though she had a style which should be bread and butter for people like Dana White, she never had that little extra something to feel special. Even after she beat Amanda Ribas, nobody was clamouring for her as a title threat. And I know Ribas dominated the first round, and that maybe played into sort of the perception that Marina had, that she won that fight through a lucky punch in a fight that she was losing. This, to me, though, was the first time I saw a Marina Rodriguez that could cause the top 5 problems. I liked her jab, she showed a lot more aggression than she'd done in some of her previous fights, and she had Waterson reeling at times. Especially in that third round, she could have very easily put Michelle away if she timed a power strike. She was a little hesitant early in the fight, but I think once she realised Michelle didn't have the power to cause her problems, she went on the forward foot and didn't allow Michelle the chance to counter and grapple in the way she normally does. There were some cautions she'll need to work on. She tired in the final 2 rounds, she let Michelle back into the fight a little bit, and I do have big worries about how content she is when she gets taken down. It was something we saw against Carla Esparza and Cynthia Calvillo. Ribas did the same thing in the first round before the knockout, and again with Waterson in the third round. But strawweight is such a striker-heavy division, it's not the massive issue it could be in another weight class. In terms of Michelle Waterson, we've seen her enough times now to know how she approaches a fight. Jackson Wink fighters all use pretty much the same template. They stay on the outside, they spam the front kicks to frustrate the opponents, and they counter when they get too close. But that style only works when you've got the right body type to get away with it. Like, Holly Holm uses this very well because she's so big for that division. But Michelle is tiny. She's like, what, 5'1", 5'2"? And because of that, that Jackson Wink style is nowhere near as effective. I think going to somewhere like AKA, a very grappling heavy gym, would play to Michelle's strengths perfectly. But she's 35 now, she has a family in Albuquerque. I don't see this changing. She's going to be a Jackson Wink for pretty much the rest of her career, and I don't really see her evolving all that much between now and whenever the time she retires. The big takeaway for me though is that Marina is, in my opinion, someone worthy of challenging the top 5. Honestly, I would go as far as to book her versus Weili. Now, I know Dana's teasing the idea of running Weili versus Rose back. I'm not 100% sold on that, but I think a Marina fight would be very compelling. I've said this for a long time. Strawweight is knocking it out the park these past few years. These matches deserve to headline, whether they're male or female, because they're just good, high-quality matchups. In terms of the rest of the card, we need to discuss something which I think we've all been thinking for a while, but we need to come out about it. Donald Cerrone should seriously consider retirement. Now, Cowboy's been part of this sport for a long time. Entertaining fighter, beloved fan favourite. But even when he lost, he was losing against top tier guys, or guys who were on the verge of becoming great. The Leon Edwards, the Darren Tills of the world. We've never seen him get blown out against a guy who, in my opinion, is below his level. And with no disrespect to Alex Morono, he seems like a nice kid. This was the first time I felt Donald Cerrone lost a match to a guy he shouldn't have lost to. Donald's always had issues with starting fights slowly, and we've seen people exploit this for years. I was surprised by how quickly he seemed to crumble even by his standards. And when you get to that stage, you need to start thinking about hanging it up. I don't think Cowboy's at a BJ Penn level where it becomes uncomfortable watching him fight. I personally thought he beat Anthony Pettis back at UFC 249, but if he's not careful, it could end up turning into a Penn situation. Give it a few months, wait for the crowds to come back, and give him a big send-off retirement fight in Texas, whether he wins or loses. Congratulations to Alex Morono for the win, but with all respect, Cowboy was the big story of that fight. We had the big loser from the card. The big winner was Gregor Gillespie. There was a lot of people wondering how Gregor would look after the Kevin Lee knockout. And in my opinion, Diego Ferreira was going to be a good litmus test for how well he recovered from that setback. And honestly, if you love MMA grappling, this was a perfect fight. Scrambles, momentum shifts, the pace these two guys were putting on was absolutely unbelievable. Normally when you have two grapplers face one another, it turns into a sloppy kickboxing match. But both guys played to their strengths, and in my opinion, it delivered. It was a purist fight. If you're somebody who just purely likes to stand up, avoid this match. But as somebody who does like grappling, who loved things like Carlos Newton versus Kazushi Sakuraba, this is right up my street. I think Gregor deserves a lot of credit since he did seem to be on the back foot at the end of the first round, but he got that early takedown in the second and he was relentless from that point on. Diego's always been a mentally tough guy, so to see him break in the way he did shows how smothering Gregor can be. I did notice Gregor seemed eager to shoot whenever Diego landed on him, so I'm not 100% sold on how much he enjoys taking a punch. But given what we went through against Kevin Lee, it was a much needed bounce. I saw someone on Twitter describe this card as an extended prelim. Yes, the fights were good, and in the case of Gregor vs Ferreira, fantastic. But you never felt the matches had any long-term ramifications. They were fights for the sake of it. Now, this has always happened to an extent with fight nights in the past, especially when you go to places like Asia and South America. With the UFC Apex and fights falling through days before the show, it's become a lot more noticeable. The main event and Gregor vs Ferreira are your two big must-watches. And also as well, for anyone who criticises women's MMA being randomly placed on the main card, I would take Montserrat Corneo versus Cheyenne Bays 10 times over than I would Maurice Green versus Rogerio de Lima. That, in my opinion, was one of the worst fights I have seen for a long time. And it did the heavyweight division a real disservice. Well, that's everything though for the Fight Night reaction for Rodriguez versus Waterson. Please stay tuned to the channel. We've got plenty of stuff coming up, including checking out our preview for UFC 262. Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler will hopefully be taking place this weekend. We've got a recap of that one coming up on the Sunday after the show. Please check out our preview. Like, share, subscribe, do everything you can to support this channel. This is the INC. Thank you for watching.